Lawrence Anthony hit the headlines when he helped save the Baghdad Zoo animals from the war. But that was actually just an accidental detour from his real work here at home. You've never seen or heard anything quite like this.
This man is calling his adoptive animal family. But even though he's come to know them over the past 4 years, he can never take the relationship for granted. One mistake and he'd be dead.
Come, Baba. Hello, Baba.
This enthusiastic fellow is Numzan, and he's come to greet Lawrence Anthony, the owner of Thula Game Reserve in KwaZulu-Natal.
Hello, my baby.
Soon, Numzan was joined by the rest of the family, who wouldn't allow him to hog the limelight. Within seconds, we were the center of attention. It was a highly charged moment. Although these elephants are contented and well-adjusted, they are wild animals. As we drove off, the gentle Numzan brushed his trunk against the window.
Numzan, no.
Breaking it instantly. It was a clear demonstration of his immense power.
I honestly admit that I wanted to get the hell out of here. It was a combination of the scariest thing I've ever done. But also there was a sense of absolute peace, and it wasn't just from my head. It was from my heart. It's amazing, amazing.
Thula is the oldest private game reserve in KwaZulu-Natal and was once the hunting ground of Zulu King Shaka. Later, it was an acclaimed hunting lodge until Lawrence and his French wife, Françoise Malby, bought it some years ago and turned it into a reserve for ecotourism. Then in 1998, this herd of 7 elephants from a ranch in Mpumalanga was offered to Lawrence.
The herd are the remnants of 2 herds, one from Botswana and one from Kruger. And those herds, which used to be substantial herds, had been watered down through hunting and through selling off of the animals to just these 3 and 4 that was left. And then these 2 herds were then combined and put together.
The catch was that the herd was considered a troublesome one.
The information we had was just the matriarch had learned to break an electric fence, and I thought, well, we could learn to deal with her and that there wouldn't be a problem with the others. We only found out afterwards, in fact, that the herd was just not responding at all. They were just very unhappy being in confined areas.
And they didn't feel any happier after an 800-kilometer journey from Mpumalanga. On arriving at Thula, the traumatized 7 immediately headed for a corner of the boma. This boma hasn't been used in the last 4 years, but this is where the elephants lined up, facing north, led by their matriarch, Nana. They wanted to get back home to Mpumalanga. The next morning, the herd was gone, and it would be 2 days before they were spotted.
We had 10 trackers out there, helicopters, we just couldn't find them. And eventually the helicopter pilot picked them up and he started driving them back again. And that involves swooping in very low and driving the elephants from behind. But he drove them right back. They were 10 or 15 meters just had to cross the road to get back into Thula. And then the matriarch just took a decision no further. And she just stood and nothing would move her. And they just formed the defensive position. The adults with their heads out and their bums together and all the babies behind them. And nothing would move them.
With night falling, the search had to be called off and the KwaZulu-Natal Parks Board issued rifles to all rangers in the area with an order to shoot if they had to.
It was described as being the conservation equivalent of a Chernobyl. You know, you get a herd of rogue elephants out there in amongst rural settlements. It's extremely dangerous. The elephants are agitated, they're unhappy, they'll charge anything, and they're huge.
So how did you get them back?
Well, I negotiated with Parks Board. They're good men. They eventually agreed that I could take them back on the condition that if they came out again, if they broke out one more time, they would be put down.
With the help of the Parks Board, the elephants were recaptured and brought back to a heavily reinforced boma at Thula. Afraid that they would escape again, Lawrence decided to stay with the herd for 24 hours a day. It was quite tiresome.
So I started talking to them, and I would just talk about anything. I mean, talk about Bob Dylan or mathematics or, you know, just my thoughts, whatever's in my head. And I found after doing that for a couple of nights, it seemed to soothe them down a little bit. And I used to sing. I used to walk around just singing. And I just did that day after day after day. And then eventually one day I went down there And it was just the most amazing thing. Somebody turned the light off. It was just, phew, everything had changed. I don't know what happened. And I was standing at the fence and the matriarch walked over to me and put her trunk out through the electric wires. And I backed off, of course. And then she came back and she did it again, and I ignored it. An hour later, she did it again. So I just held my ground, and she put her trunk out and she touched me.
For Lawrence, this was the signal that the elephants were ready to be released into the reserve.
The next day, we actually picked up that they were on the boundary of the fence, and the matriarch had her trunk underneath the middle electric wire, and she was walking along the wire with her trunk there, sensing the electricity. It's amazing. It's like they've got voltmeters in their trunks. They can tell there's power on or power off, and they walk the entire boundary fence, 24 kilometers.
Looking for the weakest link.
Looking for the weakest link in that fence.
But they didn't attempt to break out, and Lawrence realized that the elephants had accepted their new home when, a few weeks later, he opened his front door.
I couldn't believe it. The whole herd, all 7 elephants, were standing in front of the door. They were 3 meters away, and they were pulling the thatch out of the roof.
The big bonus was that 3 of the elephants were pregnant. The herd has since grown to 11. Evident all the time is the amazing relationship between Lawrence and the animals. This is Mandla, and he's just trying to be brave until Lawrence takes command.
No. Okay, boy.
But last year, Lawrence's world took a dramatic turn when war broke out in Iraq. Lawrence realized that the animals in the Baghdad Zoo were going to be in trouble, so he made contact with the American forces to offer his help, and within days, he was on his way to the war-torn city. The Baghdad Zoo, the biggest in the Middle East, had already come under fire.
The main battle for Baghdad took place in the park and the zoo. The Fedayeen had dug into these areas, and the American tanks came in. The battle was fought. Some of the tanks went between the cages.
Abandoned by the staff, the animals were in a terrible condition.
The lions particularly had been traumatized. A mortar shell had blown their cage open. And the lions were scrawny and listless. They hadn't had any water to drink for so long. Their tongues were so swollen, they just put their heads into the water until the water loosened their tongues and they could start drinking a bit.
But they were neglected animals all across the city. One of the places that Lawrence went to check was the palace of Uday Hussein, who had kept a private menagerie.
When I first got there, I saw 2 dogs. There was an Alsatian and a Labrador in what was, it was supposed to be the lion enclosure. So I thought, well, the dogs are there, the lions can't be here. So I opened the gate and I went in. And I sort of got to the middle, the movement caught my eye, and I said, that's a bloody lion. Then another one. Then there were 6 lions. Now, they weren't adult lions, but they were like as big as Alsatians. I tell you, you know, when you're in the bush, you always teach people, don't run, don't make a fuss, just gently avoid eye contact, just back off quietly. I tell you, all that went out the window. I ran so fast, I climbed over the people. I was in such a hurry, I couldn't open the gate. I climbed over the fence to get out. But shame, they were really in very, very poor condition. And these dogs lived with the lions. And, you know, I looked at that and I thought, isn't that amazing? Outside here, you know, human beings, everyone's killing each other. Inside here, the dogs are sleeping with the lions.
But the most horrific collection was at a place called Luna Park, which traded in exotic animals.
We checked on these animals about a week ago. And we spoke
With the help of 2 squadrons of American soldiers, Lawrence closed it down.
There was a camel completely covered in mange, lying in a tiny little area in the sun, no shade. There was a pelican tethered to a stake, standing in the sun in the desert sand. There was a bear in a cage that was smaller than this Land Rover. He'd been there for 5 years, a huge bear.
Lawrence spent 5.5 months in Baghdad, coordinating funding and aid for animals in distress and setting up the first SPCA in Iraq.
We have another man from...
The night of his return to Thula, he was welcomed home by his Pacadam friend.
Every time I go away, they arrive to say, hello. It's very strange.
Or where have you been?
Or where have you been? Yeah.
Last week, Lawrence became the first South African to receive the Distinguished Earth Day Award at the United Nations in New York for his extraordinary rescue initiative at the Baghdad Zoo.
You're just a boy from Zululand. Has it changed the person you are on the inside?
I think that as one focuses on doing things and does more things, you become aware that you can do more. It's wonderfully therapeutic to do something that helps something else or someone else. And I think I've learned that.
Well, there's a lesson for Easter.